Welcome to Spring Lib.
Here we're looking at why it's more difficult to get an object moving on a surface than to keep it moving. So say that we have a object at rest on a flat table. We're going to have static friction is 0. And so the important thing to note here is that there's two kinds of friction. There's static friction and kinetic friction. And if you push horizontally with a small force, static friction establishes an equal and opposite force that keeps the book at rest. But if we push harder, the static friction force increases to match the force that you're applying. But eventually the maximum static friction force is exceeded and the book would move. And that's where kinetic friction would come in. And we know that the maximum static friction force is going to be equal to the coefficient of static friction, mu s, times n. And static friction is subtle because the friction force is variable and it depends on the external forces acting on an object. And in general, we know that the coefficient of static friction is greater than or equal to the coefficient of kinetic friction. So that's why it's harder to move a stationary object than it is to keep a moving object in motion. It's all because of these two different coefficients of friction for either static, which is an object at rest, with a force being applied to it, or kinetic friction, which is an object moving.